Welcome and thank you all for joining us today. As we get started here, understand that this is a recorded session, but I will be watching the chat area live to answer questions and engage in conversation. If there are any answers we cannot provide today or you think of something afterward, you can contact me at russ.nicloy@macertechnologies.com. This session is on stopping site distance in WISTOP projects. We'll be looking at the analysis of a WISTOP project for site distance requirements in plan and profile aspects. We'll cover creating the site obstructions around the project area, creating the site distance profiles in both directions along the project, creating sight lines in plan view, and creating the site distance sheets for the project sheet set. Just a little bit about who I am. My name is Russ Nicloy. I'm a civil drafting and solutions specialist at Macer Technologies. I've got 10 years of production experience, and that was followed by 13 years at a reseller focusing on the civil industry and Civil 3D use specifically. I've worked closely with WISDOT during the implementation and evolution of their Civil 3D standards over the years as well. Currently, I am a consultant member of Methods Development Unit focusing on training. So the first thing that we need to look at here is creating the obstructions along the project. This is going to identify where site distances could be shortened in plan view generally, but there is a three-dimensional aspect to it here. First, what we're going to do is create feature lines along where the obstruction is. Maybe it's in a line of trees that is too close to the road, maybe it's some buildings, something that's close and could create obstructions along a roadway. Then we're going to create an obstruction surface from those feature lines and then combine that with the existing surface and create a final combined obstruction surface. You'll see there I've even got the names listed there. We're going to create the combined EX or existing obstruction surface. We're going to paste in the existing surface and then the obstruction surface on top of that so that they triangulate correctly. And then we will have a surface that kind of, it's not your typical surface. It's not a surface you would have on most design portions of your file, but it is going to be there enough that it will block views at certain angles of our design. Now over here in Civil 3D, we are in the site stop51exist.dwg file. It's got a data reference of the 51 alignment, that's the highway that we're working on, the existing surface, and an XREF of the topo EX so that we can see where potential obstructions might be located, basically the existing conditions here. So I'm going to come in here and create a grading basically for the obstruction area. Now the area that we're working in really doesn't have anything right up against the road, so we're going to simulate as if it did. I'm going to come up to the Home tab of the ribbon, Create Design Panel, Feature Line tool, Create Feature Lines, and I'm going to place a feature line where this is. I'm going to name it obstruction -NB for northbound, and maybe even put in the stationing. In this case, I'm just going to put a 1, but put the stationing in, that way you can find it, especially on longer projects. I'll click OK here, and then I'm going to act as if this tree line or there's something up against the road right here. The first thing I'm going to do though is I'm going to make a kind of a wing to this. I'm going to put this first point here at 0 elevation, put another one here at 0 elevation. Basically what that's doing is it's going to prevent sight lines from accidentally going through what we're working on here. It kind of creates a sidewall to it. Again, placing at 0 elevation, just going to trace along our building or whatever it is that is our obstruction in this area. I'll put the last one here and then another wing at that back end right there. Enter twice to end that command. Now I'm going to grab that feature line and go to the Edit Elevations panel and drape it over the surface, over the existing surface. I am not going to use the intermediate grade breaks here. So I'll say OK, and then I'll select that feature line again to drop it over the surface. Now I'm going to, with that still selected, if you let go of it, just select it again, come up to the Edit Geometry Stepped Offset command. I'm going to offset this at 5 feet. Now this number is kind of just subjective. I'm going to do 5 feet to the east, or further away from the roadway. The elevation difference I'm going to make 20 feet, something really tall, something much taller than what we need. I'll hit enter, and now I'm going to do another 5 feet. If you want to do a different distance, you have to restart the command, but I'll just select that line, select to the east again. This time I'll do an elevation difference of -20 from way up where we are now, and then drops that back down. I'll hit enter, escape to get out of that command. I'll select the last one that we put in there. We've got it near the surface, but to make sure no sight lines kind of sneak underneath this, I'm going to drape that over the surface as well. Again, the existing surface with the intermediate gray brakes turned off. I'll click OK, and then I'll select that line again to assign it. There we are. I'll hit escape. And now I'm going to come over here to build a surface. I should show that in the prospector there's our existing surface, data shortcutted in. I'm going to come up here to the Home tab of the ribbon, Create Ground Data, Surfaces, Create Surface. I'm going to call this surface the EXOBS for the existing obstruction. I don't need a display style right now. I don't necessarily need to see this. If you want to check what's going on, you can use that. In the prospector under surfaces, I'll expand EXOBS, expand definition, right click on break lines, add, and then I'm just going to go with the standards here, the basics, and I'm going to grab those three break lines. Now, if you've got the style on, you should see it immediately at that point. What we're going to do though is come back and notice now we have two surfaces. We need to make a third surface that combines those two. I'll come back up to the Home tab of the ribbon, Create Ground Data, Surfaces, Create Surface. I'm going to name this CMBN for combine, EX for the existing surface I'm going to bring in, and then EXOBS for the one that we just created. This one I am going to change the style to something that's appropriate. Border would be fine. I'm actually going to do existing triangles just so we can see it. I'll say OK to that. Start that surface right there. I'll expand that surface in the prospector here, expand definition, right click on edits and paste surface. Now pasting order does matter. We want to do the existing surface first. I'll say OK, and that brings in. Now this is why order matters, because we're going to paste this surface over the top of the existing surface, and these triangles in here will react. I'll right click on edits, paste surface, grab the existing obstruction surface, and now you can see that you can't even see where those feature lines are because the surface is right over the top of them. You can kind of see the long triangles there that are indicating that that's there. I'll right click on the surface, go to Surface Properties, and change the surface style back to the existing border or no display. I'll say OK, and there we are. So now we're going to take a look at creating sight distance profiles. This is the third dimension of this. This is going to take a look at specifically the looking out over hills and making sure that you can see far enough over a hill to be safe in a safe driving area. The first thing we're going to do here is create the sight distance file with the alignment and offset profiles at -6 and +6, or 6 feet left, 6 feet right, for both travel directions. The idea here is that we want to get as close to where the driver eye height or the average driver eye height is going to be along our design. We're then going to create some data files. Now, what we're doing is we're going to run the sight distance analysis, but it's going to output TXT files that we will then turn around and use to create profile data of the sight distances. It's not going to be a traditional profile that we're creating here, but we are going to create profile data of the distances that we can see. Then we're going to create the profile views with no profile data and import the profile data files into those views so that we can analyze and see where there are potential problems. Then after that, we're going to create profiles for sight distance limits in the profile views. That way we can mark where the actual problem is. Wherever our data file profile crosses these site distance limit profiles is going to be an area that we need to do something about, or we need to take action on. So first, let's talk about creating the site distance file with the alignment. As I said, we're going to create offset profiles, both 6 feet to the right and to the left of the center line, to better indicate where the travel direction visual locations are going to be. Now, if you have more than 2 lanes, you may need to do a profile a little bit further over than 6 feet. That's just, as I said, an average of where most eye heights are going to be as they're crossing your terrain. Then we're going to create the available site distance profile data files. This is that TXT file I talked about. This is going to be based on a maximum site distance provided by the FDM 11-10 attachment 5.1. You can see it on the screen there. We're using the greatest speed or the greatest distance that we're going to run into. So in this chart, we're using the 70 mile per hour speed at the E avoidance maneuver column. There's nothing magical about that in particular, except for that's the largest distance on this list. So we're going to round that up to 1,500 feet as a general rule. Then from there, we're going to run the check site distance for a 6-inch object. It actually asks us what height we want to check for, and we'll input 6-inch object here. And in that dialog, along with the 6-inch object, we're going to identify the maximum distance as 1,500 feet, the eye height and offset of our driver, or of our average driver, the target of where they're looking, and that is important because if you mark it to something way off to the side of the road, it's going to maintain that object. So we're going to target the center line of the roadway back, so that it's where, if they're watching the roadway, this is where the sight line is going to be. We are not going to create component lines. The site distance analysis tool does provide plan lines of where those sight lines are as you go around curves. We're not going to create those now because this is more about the profile at this point. Then we're going to identify the WISTAT site distance profile XSL. This is a style format for the TXT data file that we'll be creating. The idea is that it has to be formatted in a certain way so that the profiles are created correctly. In particular, especially if we're going in the opposite direction, that's really where the formatting really becomes important. And then we're going to set the location and the name of the file that we're creating, that TXT file that we're going to output and later use to our profiles. Then we're going to go back and repeat this process for the 24-inch object in our first direction. Then we're going to repeat both the 6-inch and 24-inch objects in the opposite direction. During this process, in the site distance dialog box, we're going to enter the alignment from high station to low station, which is opposite of what we would normally do. That dialog box does just fine at that, but the formatting on the text file is going to reverse it so that Civil 3D can read the file. That's why that formatting file is so important. So at the end of this phase, we're going to have 4 text files, all with a name and direction and object height, so that we know which one is which as we start to use those files in the actual workflow itself. Then we're going to go in and create the profile views with no profile data at first. One for the normal direction, one for the opposite direction. Now, profile views will move from, in our cardinal direction or in our first direction. The profile itself will print itself in the opposite direction for that for the second one that we create. We're then going to import the profile data files into the profile views. They're going to appear in all the views, so we will have to go in and clean them up and turn them off where they don't belong. So the opposite direction ones won't look right in the original direction profile views, so we will need to turn those off and clean some things up. And then we're going to go in and create the profiles for the site distance limits in the profile views. In this case, we're going to be using FDM 11-10 attachment 5.4 for those limits. And here you can see a screenshot of what that looks like. We're looking for a certain speed on the left-hand column, and in the sight distance column there, you can see I have marked 425. Very different than the 1500 feet that we're going to use originally or in the first couple of steps there. This is to mark out where a shorter sight distance is actually going to be a problem. So anytime our profile crosses this 425 line that we'll put in, that's where our problem is. We're basically putting an elevation, in quotes, an elevation of the speed from the station. So we're going to put in 425 as our elevation, even though that's actually a distance. Now we're going to create the profile data here. First thing that we need to do is make the profiles that our eyesights are going to be following along with. So I'll go up to the Home tab of the ribbon, Create Design, Panel, Profile, Pull Down, Create Surface Profile. Make sure that I'm on the 51 alignment. I'm going to do it off of the combined surface that we're working on, and I'm going to say a +6 for the northbound lane. I'll say add to that, and I'll do a -6 for the southbound when we do that. I'll click Add, and then I'll say, okay, you could make a profile view, but we don't need to see those necessarily. They're just going to be underneath the data that we work with here. Now I'm going to go up and create, we're going to go to the Analyze tab to create the visibility check here. I'm going to go to the Design panel, Visibility Check, Check Sight Distance. In here I'm going to make sure to use the alignment profile. I'm using my 51 EX alignment, and I need to pick the northbound, which is the +6. There's a dash and a negative for this one, so make sure you're using the +6 foot. For the project, I'm going to say that this starts at 5:20:00 and ends at 6:50:00. The check interval is how often is it going to check the eye location. It's an iterative process, so I'm going to do 25. It's a nice base number there. And then we have to pick the surface it's using. I'm going to pick the combined EX. I'll click the plus sign to add that into the list here. If you skip that step, if there's nothing in this box, it's not working against the surface, so you need to do that. I'll click Next. For the minimum sight distance, I'm going to use that 1500 feet from our FDM chart. And then the eye offset is a +6 foot on the northbound lanes. In the southbound or the opposite direction, you'll want to do a negative there. I'll do a +6 foot for this. For the target height, 0.5 or 6 inches is what we want. So I'll say Next. I'm going to uncheck each of these. These are the sight lines. We don't need those for this phase of this. I'm going to come down here, make sure the Create Site Analysis Report is turned on. Click the drop-down menu and choose the WIS.Sight Distance Profiles XSL. That's critical to the way that the text file will be created. It has to be created in a very, very specific way so that it works, especially in the opposite direction. Click on the ellipsis button for the Save To. I'm going to go to our project file here, and in the Design folder, Design Checks. And in here, I need this to be named ASD_51, which is the highway name, _northbound, which is the direction, _6IN, notice there's no inch marker there, _exist, _1500. So everyone will know which text file that we're working with here. I'll click Save, and then I'll click Finish to run this. I'll speed this up so you don't have to watch the thinking bar there. And there we are. That first one's done. I'm going to return up there and go to the visibility checks, check sight distance again. And again, make sure that these are set correctly. This time I am going to do the opposite direction. So I'm going to go to the -6 foot. And I do need the stations to be backwards. So I'll do 6:50:00 and the positive station will be 5:20:00. Check interval is still 25. I'll add the surface. Go to Next. I do need to re-enter the 1500. And now for the eye offset, I'm going to do a -6 foot. And for the target offset, I'll also do a -6 foot. I am also going to do the target height here of 2 feet for the 24-inch. So not only am I doing the opposite direction right now, but I'm also doing for the 24-inch so you can see the differences. I'll click Next, and I'll check mark these here. I'll click the drop down, make sure to pick the width.sight distance again because the opposite direction in particular, that's really important. In here for the name, I'm going to select on the one that's already here, so most of it's filled in. I just need to change the direction to make this southbound and make the size 24 instead of 6. And I'll click Save. I'll click Finish, and again I'm going to speed this up. I am going to drop off camera to build the other two. They're built in a very similar manner as this, but they will be here when we get back. Now, just to show that we've got all four there, there are all four of them there with the naming conventions, northbound, southbound, 6-inch and 24-inch. So those are available to us. The next thing we need to do is create the profile views that those will be displayed in, because right now all we have are text files. I'll go to the Home tab of the ribbon, Profile and Section Views, the Profile View drop down. I'll create Profile View, and for this, make sure that we're in the right alignment. The Profile View style, I'm going to change to the Sight Distance style. I'll click Next. I'm going to go to the Profile View height, where I'm going to set this to be 0 for the minimum, and 200 feet above the actual distance that we need, which was 1500, so I'm going to go 1700 for this. Remember that elevation doesn't matter. The elevation is actually distance in this case. So that looks like a huge profile view, but we'll need it for the different views that we're going to make. The profile display options, I'm going to turn off the profiles that are here because we want the ones that are coming from the text files to be what we use. I'll say create profile view. I'll drop that in here. I'm going to go back up and do another one here. Profile view, create profile view, sight distance. It should remember a lot of what we did here. Obviously the distance, or the height it won't, so user specified 0 to 1700. And turning off the two profiles that exist there. I'll click create profile view. And now I'm going to bring in those text files as profile data. So I'll go to the Home tab of the ribbon, Create Design Panel, Profile pull down. I'll do Create Profile View from Profile from File. I'm going to go over to our project, into the Design Checks folder, and I can do these in any order, but I'm going to click on the first one there. I'll just start at the top and work my way down. I am going to go into the profile style and make this the available sight distance 6-inch. Click OK, and don't worry about the message there. And there you can see it shows up in both because technically they're both tied to the same alignment and profile view, but that is a good looking site analysis. Now this is the northbound, so we're going to leave it in here. We'll take it out of the one up above, but I have a couple more to add here. So I will do this in a sped up version so you can see that all the steps are the same, but it's basically, we don't need to watch it except for this part right here. I do want to show that it's available sight distance 24-inch for that one. I'll click OK, and then that shows up there. There you are. Now, it looks like a mess because we've got northbound and southbound in both views. So this lower one here, I'm going to select on the profile view, go into the profile view properties. I'll right click, but you could go into the menu as well. And in here, I'm going to look over here. So I want the northbound here. The first two that I did were the northbound, so I'm going to uncheck the second two. So they are done by number over here. I'll click OK, and that leaves the northbound there. The southbound has a different feel to it. It's flowing backwards, so I'll select on this southbound profile view, go to the profile view properties, and uncheck the first two, so leaving the second two available. I'll say OK, and now that is what that looks like. Now we do need to add in our sight distance of where problems actually occur. So I'll go up here to Profile, and I'll create Profile Creation Tools. I'll select on the profile itself. I'm going to change the profile style for this one to the stopping sight distance. Notice there is also a decision sight distance if you need that one. Stopping site distance, I'll click OK. I'm going to select this point here. I'm actually going to create just basically a straight line through here. I'm actually going to use the transparent command, the station elevation here. I'll select on the grid. I'm going to start somewhere over here. It doesn't really matter as long as it's before our project. I'll left click a point here, and the height there, the elevation, is actually the distance of 425 in this particular case. And I'll come over to this side here. I'm going to do it way to the end here, and again 425 for the elevation there. That adds it to both of them, which is good because we need it for both. So I'll hit enter, enter again to let it know that I'm done basically, and close the profile tool. If you needed to add any others, you can do that as well. Next, we're going to go in and create the sightlines for the plans. Now, what we've done up to this point is for the profiles, but now we're going to do it for the plans. And we are going to run the same site distance analysis tools we ran earlier, but we ran it at a greater distance before. We ran it at 1,500 feet. Now we're going to run it for the necessary distance. This is that 425 in the case of our speed for this particular project. We're going to check the FDM 11-10 attachment 5.1, go back to that, and get the stopping site distance limits for where we actually want to stop. It's not the highest number now. We actually need where this is going to stop. And if you need to put in decision site distance limits for your project, if that's needed, you're going to want to visit FDM 11-10 attachment 5.2 for that information. Now, like I said, we're going to run the sightline analysis, but we're going to place the lines this time. The first 4 times through, we didn't place the lines. Now we are going to place the lines in our plan view. We are going to put them on the correct layers because there's going to be a lot of stuff, a lot of visual here, and we may need to turn things on and off depending on what we're trying to see and trying to access. So we will make sure that they're on the proper layer. We're going to save the text file separate from the profile data, so we still get a text file output. But we can add that into the project so that this area can be recreated later if a new sheet needs to be created. And we are going to repeat this for all 4, just like we did for the profiles, the 6-inch, the 24-inch, and then the 6-inch and 24-inch in the opposite direction. So we will end up with 4 total. So now we're going to place the lines in the plan view so that when we do the plan and profile sheets, it will be there. We're going to repeat what we did before and go to the Analyze tab of the ribbon, Design Panel, Visibility Check, check Site Distance, choosing the same profile, alignment and profile, the same distances here, so 520, 00 to 650, 00. The check interval of 25 feet, surface of combined. Now this one, the minimum site distance is actually going to be 425 because this is how much we actually need. The other one was kind of, a broad, how far can you see? I am going to do a positive 6 foot here. I'll do a positive 6 foot here. Target height of 6 inch. And in this case, I'm going to leave these check marked. I am going to add the layer names in here. So the visible sight lines, I'm going to actually hit S so I can drop down into this area here. If you don't see these here, go to the Wis.Sheets tab of the ribbon, add all components. Okay, so that these should be in here. I'm going to widen this so I can see which ones are which. And I need the EB1 visible sight lines. They've got the 1, 2, 3, 4 in here so that they do line up in order. So I'll click that. The next one is 2, and I'll do the 6 inch. Notice I'm also not only looking at the size, but the SSD versus DSD. So everything in here is important. So keep track of what layers you're using. And then coming down here, making sure the create site analysis report is on. And again, we are going to use the WIS.dot version of that. We are creating a text file, although we really aren't using it in the way that we use the other method. I am going to click on one of the ones that we used before, the 6-inch, northbound 6-inch, 1500. I'm going to change the size of this to 425. But this way we have a text file that we can recreate this profile if we had to, or any of the data that we have here. I'm going to click finish, and again I'll speed this up through the analysis part. And now if I zoom in here, you will be able to see that we have lines here. They are on the proper layers, so if you needed to get rid of one to see something else, you can turn layers on and off, but that will be true all the way through the project, whether you've put obstructed surfaces in or not. It doesn't look like I even put this close enough to actually obstruct the view going around that curve. So 1500 or the 425 feet of distance is going to work out for us there. So we'll now repeat those steps again for the 24-inch on the northbound, as well as the southbound 6-inch and southbound 24-inch. I'll do that off camera so you don't have to watch that. It's the same process over again. Now that we have all that in place, we've got the profile and plan data done. Now we're going to go in and create the site distance sheets. For this, we're going to first create view frames. The view frames are an important part of this because it breaks down the alignment or the length of our project into sheet-sized sections. It puts frames out there so that we can plan where things are going to be. It also allows us to be consistent with what ends up on each sheet. So the frames are an important first step. Then we're going to go in and create the site distance plan and profile sheets from those view frames. This is going to use the proper template file and pull over the sheets and all the title block information and so forth. So this will make it available to the site distance sheets, so we'll have a consistent look. And then we're going to go in and do some plan sheet annotation. Now we're not going to do the full sheet here, but we'll give you kind of a taste of the things that you'll have to be looking at and where you need to go to get them. So some important things to do on the plan sheet for annotation. So the first step here is to create the view frames. We're going to use the 05-pp-w.dwt. This is a template file that you can set, and it's in the WIS.dot folder full of sheet templates, different sheet templates. So you want to be careful which one you pick. There's going to be a lot in there, but that's the one that we're looking for. And there is going to be a choice during this process to set the profile view style. The WIS.dot standards have a site distance profile view style built into it, so you won't have to recreate this every time. It'll be there automatically. We do want to make sure to set that on our way through. Then we'll be creating the site distance plan and sheets, plan and profile sheets. We'll do that through the regular sheet creation process tools. One of the things that we're going to do here that we wouldn't normally do, normally we make sure that the sheets that we create end up in our project sheet set. In this case, we're going to create a new separate sheet set. This is going to be steps that we take separate from this process so that it does have the proper title block information set up and so forth, but it won't be the normal project sheet set. This is going to be its own sheet set so that this data is kind of separate from our regular sheet set data. And then we're going to go into our plan sheet and create the annotation. We're going to go into the site distance tool palette for much of what we're going to look at here. In there, you'll see that we have multi-leader text. The different text styles are named after the label type that you're getting, so hopefully it'll explain itself as you see them. You'll say, oh yeah, I need that one, or I need this one over here. Also, there is a dimension that we're going to use here. There's one built specifically for this called SSD Profile Dim. It looks a little bit different than a traditional dimension. Well, not terribly different, but a little different. So it's very specific to the way that we want it to look on our sheets here. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're going to create the view frame group for the sheets that we're going to be creating. Now it's very possible that you already have the view frames created in the design folder, view frame group folder, and you're data shortcutting them into the file. I don't have that. I'm just going to set this up in this file. It's an alternative way that you can do this. To do this, I'm going to go to the Output tab of the ribbon, Plan Production Panel, Create View Frames. And in here, we want to make sure the alignment is correct, the user specified stationing. I'm going to do 51700, so I start a little bit before our project actually starts, and 65000, a little bit beyond our project end. I'll click Next. In here, I do want the plan and profile. I'm going to click the ellipsis button here to make sure I have the right sheet selected. In case it comes up and it doesn't, right now I'm in the right area, but the 05 ppw dot is what you want here. If you don't have that, click the ellipsis button, come over here. Where it takes you is one level down, so I'm just going to go one level up to the Sheets folder, then scroll down to the 05 ppw dot. You will see the big red warning message here. This is saying you shouldn't start an individual file like that, and we're not. This is the automated method, what it's meant for. So I'll click Open. And then in here, make sure you select the correct scale. I'm going to pick the 1 inch equals 100 foot. Then I'll go Next. In here, I'm going to click the Name template box. Most times it's going to be a long predetermined name. We just want to go in there and make sure that it says Site Distance Northbound as the name. Also, the number style should be 01, 02, 03, and the starting number should be 1. I'll click OK. And then down here, I'm going to make sure that the name for the view frames, I'm going to click on the template there as well. Most times it'll just be next counter. Just highlight the whole thing. Make sure that next counter is the field. Click Insert -NB. And then for the number styles 01, 02, 03, the starting number should be 1. I'll click OK. And then I'll say Next. In here, I'm going to make sure that the snap station is set to 10 and the allow additional is set to 100. And those are both turned on. Down below, I want the style to be no display because I don't want the match lines to actually show up in this. And because the match line is there, we also want none for the labels on the left and the right. I'll click Next. In here, you want to select the profile view style. Make sure that you select the site distance and the band set style of site distance. The reason we need to do that is that it's making room on our profile sheet for these areas here as it's creating this frame. They're all interconnected, and that makes a difference later. So I'll click Create View Frames, and those view frames will be in place. You'll see it goes all the way up to the north of our project there. Now we do need to put this in a sheet set. It will not be the regular sheet set for the project, where details and plan and profile sheets and all that go. So we're going to build a fresh sheet set just for this. I'm going to type SSM to start that process off. And then in the sheet set manager, that opens the sheet set manager for us, I'm going to click the drop down and click New Sheet Set. And then in here, I do want to start with an example sheet set. I'll click Next. I will use the project sheet data and then click Next. In here, I do need to name this the project number 1970-site distance. And I will also change the sheet store location to the project design checks area. In the very likely case that this is not set here, click the ellipsis button and then browse over to the project design checks and click Open. You're not picking anything other than the folder of where it's going to be located. So I'm also going to go into the sheet set properties, scroll down to the bottom here and make sure that the counties and all of this information is correct because this will be populating the title block and we want that to be correct. I'll say OK there and then Next. This is kind of a review sheet. I'm just going to click Finish. And then over here, you see that those folders are located and ready to accept the sheet data. Now, for the sheets, I'm going to go back to the Output tab of the ribbon. Actually, before I do that, I just realized that my drawing file is at 1 to 40 inch, which is not terrible. You can do this with the scale changed. It is better if you have this set. In fact, I should have set this much earlier than this. I want to go to the 1 to 100 inch scale. And it does change the way that some things look in here, but it will change them in a way that will look correct when we get the sheets up and running at 100 scale. So with that now fixed, I'm going to go back over to the Output tab, Plan Production, Create Sheets, and make sure that the Viewframe group is correct. I'm choosing all the frames in this case, but you could make a selection set. I am going to put all the layouts in the current drawing file. That way there's no problems with linking. It kind of clears up any issues there. The layout name, I'm going to come into that dialog here and make sure that we're at 010203 and the start number is set to 1, and it is. So I'll say OK. I'll choose Next. In here, I'm going to pick the Add to Existing Sheet Set. That is the default, and it's the only choice that you have right here. The new sheet set will create a new sheet set, which we just did, but not connect it to the wis.template file. So it's kind of a dangerous choice to have here for the wis.projects at least. So I'm going to make sure that the Add to Existing Sheet Set is picked, and I'm going to click the ellipsis button here, browse over to our Design Checks folder again, Design Checks, and you saw that it was already there, but I'll click on that DST file and open, and that sets that. It also sets the sheet location area down below here, so kind of paths everything out for us. I'll click Next to go to the profile views, and actually I'm going to just go to Create Sheets from here. Now it's going to save the file, and then it's asking us for a profile view origin. I'm just going to do this to the upper right here, because it will go from my origin point wherever I select to the right and up, or to the east and up. And now I'm placing those views out there. And there are those individual profile views. They're tied to the sheets that were created. Before we go any further, you can tell that the grids are not showing up. Just type REA, enter to regen. It's just a graphic thing. The grids sometimes don't always catch up with the placement of those profiles. I'm going to close this dialog here. I'm going to pop into the Sheet Set Manager and show that those sheets were created here, as well as the tabs down below. So those are all linked up. I'm going to right click on Layout 1 and choose Delete just to get that out of the way. It's a kind of the default layout tab, and it's not really related to our project at this point, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to scroll in here and take a look at the first view, and there you can see the different profiles that we created for our site distances. If I go to the O1 tab, you can see it in context. Here's that profile view that we were just looking at. Here's the planned version of that, or portion of that. It's all lined up and nice and neat. I'm going to grab this north arrow and drag that in here. Actually, I'm going to turn off my ortho. I'll hit Escape, and you're going to want to do that for every sheet because the north arrow is going to be off to the side. One of the things I'm noticing here is that we're writing a little low in the profile view sheet, and that is typical of profile sheet creation. The tool kind of places profiles low. So I'm going to double click and open the viewport. I'll select on the view, the profile view, and go to the profile view properties, the right click menu version of it. I'll go over to the elevations tab, and then user specified height. I'm going to make the minimum 0 and the maximum 1600. If you remember, we're doing a 1500 as our maximum height. In fact, that is where this blue and yellow line are right here, is at 1500. So 1600 is going to push this up. So we're right at the top edge of our profile view, but we have some room down below to place the labels and things that we need to get into this view here. So now we're going to put in the annotation, or at least in some examples of the annotation. We're not going to annotate this fully, but I'm going to go up to the Wis.Sheets tab of the ribbon, come over to palettes on off so I can turn on the palette, And then in the sheet creation panel, click that drop down and choose site distance, and that will populate the palette with the data that we need. Now you will see that there's some layers up at the top that can be useful for creating things on the correct layer. I'm just going to come down here to the multi-leader text and choose the labels that I want. Now, like I said, this is representative of the other ones that you can do. I'm going to click the category X minimum site distance and come in here. I'm going to zoom in. Notice I'm doing this in the sheet. You could also go to the model space and do this. Make sure that the model space scale is matching the scale of the sheet here, because that will affect the way that these labels are laying out in the space. So I'm going to shift right click nearest snap on the line so I get a nice connection to that line, and then I'll left click a point there to drop that landing. At the command line at this point, it's asking, do you want to overwrite the default text? Yes or no. I don't. There are things I want to change about it, but I want to use the original text there. So I'll hit enter. That puts the text in, and then you can see that there's some X's in there that we got to clean up. I'm just going to double click on that text, and for this is a category 1, 50 mile per hour, 6-inch object. I'll left click off to the side to end that, and there is our label. Now you can grab that label, grab the square grip point, and drag that around so it's sitting nicely in the profile view, not taking up too much space or overstriking anything. So you would do that with several of these here, making sure to label all of the different profiles that we have there. The other one that I want to do here right now, though, is the down at the bottom here under blocks, there is this SSD profile. If I stop from hovering over it, profile dim. It's a dimension. It's not your typical dimension. It's a block. It's a dynamic block, so we'll be able to pull it around and move it. I'm going to left click on that and drop this in. Now I'm going to kind of eyeball where this is going to go, and literally just eyeball it. Left click a point right there. Now when I select this, there are a bunch of grip points that we can use. The dark blue grip point on the left hand side will move the whole thing as a group. So if you need to kind of line this up, eyeball that in, you can do that. I'm going to grab the arrows and lengthen the dimension lines here. I'm going to shift right click nearest snap to the red line there and repeat that for the other side. And now with those in place, I'm zooming a little bit closer there and drag that over so that it matches up more correctly. And this one I'm going to drag this over. In fact, I'm going to use the shift right click apparent intersection where this line and this line cross. It's not letting me do that off of profiles, but I'll lengthen it to that point there. There we are. Now the other thing I can do is, if I needed to change this, I could select on this again, and there's a bunch of other grip points I can drag and move things around. The down arrow icon, if I select that one, will give you different categories, and then the flyouts give you the options for the rest of the text. Like right now we're under category 1 minimum required, but if we were under category 2 upper minimum, I could do that, and that whole thing changes to match that new setup. I'm going to go back to category 1, less than a minimum required. If some of this is too long and you need to make some more room, you can pick the text up by individual square grip point and move it around. Now I'm being a little bit ridiculous about where I just placed all that, so I'm going to try and bring that back together nicely. But if you need to, maybe it's a little too long and it's overstriking the arrows, you can move that up, or you can move it to the side, or even down below if you had to. But that is the way that dimension dynamic block is set up, so that we can have that in the proper location and look correct, nice, and readable. So now we would continue on with the labeling here and fixing all of the other sheets. Just continue on through the sheet list here to get that done. One thing I noticed before we leave here is that the sheet is reading incorrectly down here. The sheet name, I'm going to actually go over to the Sheet Set Manager. This field is actually populated by whatever subset the sheets are located in. Currently these are all under this one that was just created when we created the sheet set. I'm actually going to bring them up to 05, but before I do that, I'm going to I'm going to grab the entire subset here and drag that up under 05. And notice when it turns blue, that's when it's dropping in there. Otherwise, you're just dropping it in between. I am also going to double click, or actually right click, and rename the subset and take the VFG part out. It's great for identifying a view frame group, but in this case, we want this to be sight distance northbound. In fact, I might even type that in, northbound. And now I will type REA at the command line. Oh, my cursor was over the top. REA, enter. And now that will populate in each of the layout tabs that we were working with there. So one last thing that we need to clean up there. So I want to thank you all for joining this session. We have been keeping an eye on the chat for questions, and we've been trying to answer these as we go. If there are questions we didn't get to or perhaps couldn't answer today, we will get back to you with information that you need. You can contact me with questions at the email address on the screen there, russ.nicloy@macertechnologies.com. The QR code there, if you shoot that with your phone, it will enter that into your mail program, whatever email program you're using, automatically for you. So thank you very much, and if there are follow-up questions, please send those out. We appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of the sessions.